us right now is Axios world editor Dave Lawler. And Dave, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
What's your take on what you're hearing here in Davos and on the global slowdown that we're expecting?
Well, your optimism is refreshing, actually, because I have been hearing a lot of the anxiety, I think, that people are feeling that kind of last year everybody gathered here. The economy was pretty healthy. This year, the concerns are creeping in. Global growth forecasts are down. And also we're hearing a lot about this idea that the growth we are seeing is concentrated among fewer people. And that's feeding into this anxiety we're seeing among people. That's how they're voting. Politics is being affected by this. So I've been hearing a lot of doom and gloom, but there's optimism out there as well.
Well, it's also about China, right? I mean, it's China's slowing down, even still at 6.4% numbers. But do you think we'll see a deal with China, between the U.S. and China, over the near term? The next meeting, January 31.
So I actually wrote last week that signs were positive. It looked like both sides were giving strong hints that they wanted a deal, right? And so that's key to this, right? Are they ready to make the compromises they need to make a deal? There's more pessimism this week. Part of that is that the U.S. appears to potentially be taking a harder tack in terms of what they're willing to accept from China. And so, you know, we're about halfway through, a little more than halfway through this 90-day window to get a deal. It's still very much up in the air.
Let's talk about the shutdown. This is day 33 of a government partial shutdown. And for this, I want to bring in Dagan, because the White House, Dagan, is moving forward with plans to hold a State of the Union address next week. They're considering a whole host of backup plans if it doesn't happen at the House of Representatives, maybe hosted outside of Washington. This comes as Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer propose dueling Senate votes to reopen the government, Dagan.
It'll be really interesting to see how this goes, to see if Chuck Schumer and his plan to reopen the government, pay federal workers, can keep the government open until February the 8th. If they can peel any Republicans off on this, or if Mitch McConnell just gets a party line vote. Because President Trump does believe that he's winning on this, that he is standing up for border security, which is what his voters want and which some even Democrats want. And it will be interesting to see if they can get any votes on the Democratic side. But again, at least we're going to get to force these lawmakers in the Senate to step up and say, I'm going this way or that way.
Yeah, exactly. They've got to come to the table. Dave, how do you see it?
We actually have some new reporting today about maybe a way the ground could shift. My colleagues reported that there's some talk in the White House of making a bigger offer on the immigration side of things. One thing that was floating out there was the idea of giving current DACA recipients a path to green cards. That would infuriate a lot of conservatives. But there are discussions about, OK, how do we break this deadlock? Because, as you said, day 33 and no end in sight.
Let's talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who continues to make headlines. Now she has secured a seat on another House committee. The Congresswoman, along with 3 other freshman Democrats, has been appointed to the Oversight Committee. This is one of the committees that, of course, is going to be investigating President Trump. Your reaction?
She has been, as you said, stealing headlines all over the place. She's really trying to make her presence felt right away in Congress. We see the pickup on social media, certainly, that there's a lot of attention being paid to her. And she's using that big microphone that she's got, you know, pretty effectively, I would say.
Now, we all know what happened in the 2016 election, where a cabal of people at the top of the FBI and the DOJ tried to change the election. Do you think she's going to investigate that at the Oversight Committee?
I have no idea what she plans to investigate in the Oversight Committee. This is news to me as of yesterday that she was going to be on the Oversight Committee, and I hadn't even considered what she's going to do when she gets there yet, to be honest with you.
I mean, Dagan, they want to see Donald Trump's tax returns. They want to look at whether or not he's a Russian agent. A lot of stuff in the Oversight Committee. You have to wonder where all of this goes, or if it's just going to be bluster for the next 2 years.
They're trying to embarrass him. That's the Democrats. That is their M.O. for the next 2 years. I don't think that there will ever be any impeachment proceedings against this president. They want to get as much information, the tax returns and the like, to basically embarrass him in front of the American people over 2 years, and it could very well backfire. Ultimately, they're going to have to stand on their policy ideas, and their policy ideas are, we make better decisions with your money than you do, and they have to be held to that.
Well, when you're speaking about money, I mean, AOC had the idea to tax anyone with $10 million at 70%. Do you think that's going to go over? How does that go over?
So it goes over well with a segment of the Democratic base, and we actually have a new poll that shows most Democrats would be willing to vote for her, or to consider voting for her for president if she was old enough. Obviously, she isn't.
For president.
For president. And we actually have a second poll that's coming out later this week that asks people how they view the idea of socialism. And young Democrats actually view socialism a little bit more positively than they view capitalism. So this is is there's a segment of the population for which this is, the right direction to take things.
This is really interesting, Lee Carter. What do you see from your dials in talking to people about socialism versus capitalism?
You know, what I've got to say is that if we dismiss Ocasio-Cortez and socialism right now, it's at our own peril. It's very much like what happened in 2015 when people are dismissive of Donald Trump coming in, saying that his policies were overly simplistic, that they were missing and lacking substance, that they wanted something deeper, and they outright dismissed him. I think that people who are dismissing this as something that's short-sighted absolutely aren't getting why people are rallying around her and around these policies. There's a lot of hopelessness out there. There's a lot of people who want a better life, and this sounds like an easy way for them, a quick fix, and something that sounds like a different, new way of doing things. And I think that if people want to win against this, they're going to have to take it seriously and understand why it is that so many people are gravitating towards these policies and to her.
Or explain the effect of socialism. Explain the effect of socialism versus capitalism.
Well, Marie, I want to point that out. The great liberal lie that the people in the Republican Party need to push back on is that somehow the rich are rich enough to fund all these grand spending plans by these socialists and by these people on the far left. They're not. If you look at other nations across Europe, every resident, every citizen is taxed to their eyeballs in terms of fuel taxes, value-added taxes, property taxes, social welfare taxes. Everybody ends up paying for it. It's not just the rich who pays for it. And I keep saying this. Right. If you confiscated every dollar of adjusted gross income earned by the top 1% in this country, you would still be $1.2 trillion short in paying for Medicare for all. So everybody is going to get taxed.
Yeah, and that's after we know that the top 10% of earners pay 70%, almost 80% of all tax. So we'll see where this goes. Interesting conversation. Dave, it's good to have you weigh in. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Dave Lawler from Axios there.